She's been telling everyone she got that big promotion, but I know the truth. It's all for show. You should have seen her last week crying on the phone about work stress. She's not handling it. If she comes to Kentucky, she'll bring all that drama with her. The family doesn't need that right now. You know how she gets. Always the victim. We have to protect the rest of the family from her chaos. Don't tell her I said this. She can't handle the truth about herself. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 27 years old. I found those 5 messages on my older brother Brandon's phone while the screen was still glowing on the kitchen counter of our family's old countryside house in Kentucky. He had stepped outside to unload the car and I had reached over to plug the charger in for him like I always did. The text thread with our father was open. I read it twice before my fingers went numb. If you have ever read words that rewrote your entire place in your own family, you know the exact second your stomach drops and your brain tries to rewrite it back into something less ugly. I stood there holding the edge of the counter, staring at the messages and felt the first crack open in everything I thought I understood about the trip we were supposed to be starting. I put the phone back exactly where it had been. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it was folding in on itself. Brandon walked back in 2 minutes later, smiling like nothing had happened, asking if the Wi-Fi was working yet. I told him it was fine. The lie came out smoother than I expected. I spent the next hour in the small study at the back of the house, the one that still smelled faintly of the cedar chest my late mother used to keep blankets in. I was supposed to be checking the grocery list for when everyone else arrived over the next 2 days. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer of the old desk, the one nobody touched anymore. There was a single envelope at the very back, the paper yellowed at the edges. My mother's handwriting on the front said, "Only for Lauren, when you need it." I did not open it right away. I sat on the floor with it in my lap and listened to Brandon moving around in the kitchen, humming like the messages I had just read did not exist. The house felt too quiet and too loud at the same time. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. When I finally slid the letter out, the first line hit like cold water. My mother had written that she had watched Brandon do this before, not just to me, but to anyone in the family whose light started to shine a little too bright for his liking. She had kept notes. She had seen the quiet conversations he started with our father, the way he framed other people's successes as problems. She wrote that she had tried to talk to our father about it once, and he had told her she was imagining things. She told me not to make the same mistake of thinking I could fix it by being smaller. I folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. My legs felt unsteady when I stood up. I walked into the kitchen where Brandon was scrolling on his own phone now. He looked up and asked if I wanted to go into town for coffee before the others got here. His voice was the same easy tone he had always used with me. I said yes because saying no would have required explaining why, and I did not have the words yet. We drove the 15 minutes into the small town in near silence. He talked about the traffic on the highway and how the house needed new gutters. I kept seeing the 5 lines from the text thread every time I blinked. At the coffee shop, he held the door for me and ordered my usual without asking. The normalcy of it made my skin crawl. Back at the house, the afternoon light was already thinning. I went upstairs to the room I always used and closed the door. My phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Derek. He had forwarded a private chat without realising I was on the group. The screenshot showed Brandon telling another relative that I had been in therapy again and that the family needed to be careful what we say around her during the trip. The timestamp was from 2 days earlier. I sat on the edge of the bed and read it 3 times. The forwarded chat was not the first piece of evidence, it was the second. The letter in the drawer and the text thread on Brandon's phone were already enough to make the room tilt. Now there was a third. I could feel the edges of something larger starting to show. I did not reply to Derek. I put the phone face down and walked to the window. The hills outside were the same ones I had looked at every summer since I was a kid. Nothing out there had changed. Everything inside the house had. Brandon called up the stairs asking if I was coming down for dinner. His voice sounded normal. I answered that I would be there in a minute. My voice sounded normal too. I opened the drawer in the nightstand and took out the letter again. My mother's words were still there in blue ink. She had known. She had tried to warn me without saying the words out loud while she was alive. I slipped the letter into my jacket pocket and went downstairs. Brandon was already at the table with 2 plates. He had made grilled cheese the way he used to when we were teenagers. He pushed one toward me and asked how work was going. I told him it was fine. He nodded like he believed me. Halfway through the meal, my phone lit up with a message from my father. He said he and the others would be arriving tomorrow afternoon and asked if everything was ready. I typed back that it was. Brandon watched me type and smiled. I smiled back. The smile felt like it belonged to someone else. The rest of the evening passed in small, ordinary movements. We washed the dishes. We talked about the weather. Brandon went to bed early, saying the drive had tired him out. I stayed in the living room with the lights low and the letter in my pocket. At some point after midnight, I heard his phone buzz from the kitchen counter again. I did not get up to look. I already knew what kind of messages were probably waiting there. I sat in the dark until the house settled into complete quiet. The only sound was the old refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I kept waiting for the next thing to happen, for the next piece of proof to arrive, for the ground to stop shifting under me. It did not. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I made a decision I could not take back. I was not going to spend the rest of the trip pretending I had not seen what I had seen. I was not going to keep being the person who smoothed everything over so nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. I did not know yet what that decision would cost. I only knew that the cost of staying quiet had already become too high. The next morning, my older brother was already in the kitchen when I came down the stairs. He had 2 mugs on the table and the coffee pot half full. He did not look up from his phone when I sat down. Sleep. All right, he asked. The question sounded normal. The tone underneath it did not. I wrapped both hands around the mug he pushed toward me. The heat pressed into my palms until it almost hurt. Fine, I said. He glanced up then, quick and careful. Dad texted late last night. Said he was thinking maybe the trip was coming at a bad time for you. Brandon thinks you might need a quieter couple of days before everyone piles in. The name he used for himself in the sentence made the words land harder. He was already speaking as if the decision had been made without me. I set the mug down. I'm fine, I said again, slower this time. He smiled the small patient smile he used when he wanted someone to feel unreasonable for pushing back. No one's saying you're not, just that you've been carrying a lot. That promotion you landed sounded intense. People talk. The jab was soft on the surface and sharp underneath. He had taken the one thing I had been proud of and turned it into proof that I was fragile. I felt the old reflex rise up, the one that made me want to explain to shrink the story so it would not make anyone uncomfortable. I swallowed it. My phone buzzed against the table. I slid it into my lap and opened the message from Jenna at work. Client rep asked if you were okay, said they heard you were dealing with family stress and might need space on the account. You good? I read it twice. The rumour had already moved outside the family. Someone at the firm had heard enough to ask questions about my stability on a project I had led for 6 months. I looked across the table at my older brother. He was still scrolling, still wearing the same easy expression. He had no idea I had seen the thread. He had no idea I was watching the pattern he had built piece by piece. I typed back to Jenna quickly. Everything's fine here. Thanks for the heads up. Then I set the phone face down and stood up. I'm going to walk the property line before it gets hot, I said. He nodded without looking up. Take your time. I'll handle the grocery delivery when it comes. I stepped outside and kept walking until the house was behind me. The decision I had made in the dark was still there, but it felt heavier in daylight. I pulled out my phone again and called my father. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was careful in the way it got when he had already decided something and did not want to argue about it. Lauren, he said, your brother mentioned you seemed tired last night. Everything all right with the house? I stood at the edge of the old fence and watched the grass move in the wind. The house is fine. I got here early like I always do. There was a short pause. Brandon said you might want to take it easy tomorrow when everyone arrives. Maybe skip the neighbourhood thing if it feels like too much. The neighbourhood gathering had been my father's idea 3 weeks ago. A casual welcome for the relatives who lived close enough to drive over. Now it was being turned into something I needed protecting from. I'm looking forward to it, I said. My voice stayed even. It'll be good to see everyone. Another pause. All right, if you're sure. Brandon just wants to make sure we're not asking too much of you. I ended the call before the conversation could slide any further into the version of me my older brother had already sold him. My hands were steady when I put the phone back in my pocket, but the anger underneath my ribs had started to burn steady and low. When I walked back inside, my older brother was on the porch with his laptop open. He looked up as I came through the door. Everything good, he asked. Fine, I said again. The word was starting to feel like armour. He closed the laptop partway. You know, I was talking to Aunt Carol this morning. She's driving in tomorrow with Olivia. She asked how you were holding up after the promotion and everything. I told her you were doing your best, but it had been a lot. The mention of my aunt and my sister in the same sentence as his version of my life made the air in the room feel thinner. He was already seeding the story with the next people who would arrive. I did not answer. I went to the study instead and pulled the bottom drawer open again. The envelope from my mother was still there. I took it out and unfolded the second page I had not read the night before. Her handwriting was smaller on this page, more hurried. She had written that my older brother had done something similar years earlier when I got my first real job out of college. He had told our father I was burning out already and that the family should not expect too much from me. She had watched our father start treating me like I might break. She had tried to correct it once and been told she was overreacting. The page ended with one line: "He will keep doing it until someone makes him stop. Do not wait as long as I did." I folded the page and slid it back into the envelope. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the air in the room. From the porch I heard my older brother's voice on the phone. He was laughing at something. The sound carried through the open window light, and unbothered, I stayed in the study until the call ended. When I came out, he was standing in the kitchen again, pouring more coffee. He held the pot out like an offering. "Want some?" he asked. I shook my head. "I'm good." He set the pot down and leaned against the counter. "You've been quiet since you got here. If something's bothering you, you can see it." The invitation was a trap dressed as concern. I could feel it. If I brought up the thread, he would twist it into proof that I was unstable. If I stayed quiet, the story he was building would keep growing. "I'm just tired," I said. The safest lie I could offer. He nodded like he had expected exactly that answer. "That's what I told Dad. You need rest more than you need a big family thing right now." The words were soft. The effect was not. He had used my own answer to strengthen the case he was already making to our father. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my cousin Derek. "Sorry about that forward last night. I didn't realise the chat was still open when I sent it to the group. Brandon's been saying some stuff about you needing space. Just checking you're okay." I read it once, then again. The private chat he had accidentally forwarded was longer than the screenshot I had seen. Brandon had been messaging several relatives, framing every achievement I mentioned as a sign I was spiralling and suggesting the family keep things low-key around me. One line stood out: "She'll turn the whole trip into her crisis if we let her. Better if we manage expectations now." I typed back to Derek, "Thanks for checking. I'm fine." Then I put the phone in my pocket and looked at my older brother across the kitchen. He was still leaning against the counter, still wearing the calm expression of someone who believed he was in control of the room. The forwarded chat had given me the second confirmation. The letter from my mother had given me the history. The text thread on his phone had given me the proof that it was still happening. The message from Jenna had shown me the damage was already moving beyond these walls. I made another decision while I stood there watching him. I was not going to wait until the rest of the family arrived to see how far this had gone. I was going to let the neighbourhood gathering happen tomorrow the way my father had planned it, and I was going to be there when it did. My older brother pushed off the counter and picked up his keys. "I'm going to run into town for a few things. You need anything?" "No," I said. He nodded and left. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that sounded louder than it should have. I stayed in the kitchen until I heard his car start and pull away. Then I went back to the study and opened the drawer one more time. The envelope was still there. I took the whole thing and put it in my jacket pocket where I could reach it if I needed it. Outside, the light was starting to change. The afternoon was sliding toward evening. Somewhere on the road my older brother was driving, and probably already on another call, already shaping the version of me that would greet the rest of the family when they arrived. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from my father. "Brandon says you're resting this evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Get some sleep." I read it twice. The message was short. The control underneath it was not. I did not answer. I put the phone on the desk and stood at the window until the last of the daylight left the hills. The decision I had made in the dark was still holding. It felt heavier now, but it had not broken. Tomorrow the rest of them would start arriving. Tomorrow the neighbourhood gathering would happen, and tomorrow I would stop pretending the story my older brother had been writing about me was the one I had to live inside. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes right before something finally gives way. The next morning, the first car started pulling into the driveway just after 10. My sister Olivia stepped out, waving before her door was even closed all the way. My Aunt Carol followed with a casserole dish balanced on one arm, like this was still the kind of weekend where everyone showed up and pretended the air was clear. My younger brother Ethan arrived a few minutes later with family friend Tom Riley riding shotgun. Neighbour Mrs. Evelyn Harper walked over from her place down the road carrying a plate of cookies and the same easy smile she had worn at every gathering for the last 15 years. My older brother met each of them at the door with the same warm tone and the same quiet additions. I heard him tell my aunt that I had seemed tired since I arrived, that he had been trying to keep things low-key so I would not get overwhelmed. I stayed in the kitchen and let the words settle. The pattern was already moving to the new people in the room. By late afternoon, we had shifted to the small community pavilion near the house. More neighbours came, the tables filled with food and folding chairs. People laughed and caught up the way they always had. My older brother stayed close to my father, steering small conversations the same way he had steered the texts all week. It happened in the second hour. The group had broken into smaller clusters when my older brother raised his voice just enough to carry. "Lauren's been killing it with that big campaign at work," he said, looking straight at me with the smile that never reached his eyes. "Though from what I hear, the stress has been pretty rough lately. We've all been a little worried she might be spreading herself too thin again." The words landed soft and sharp at the same time. Several heads turned. My father nodded like he had already heard the version. My Aunt Carol's face shifted into concern. Mrs. Evelyn Harper paused with her cup halfway to her mouth. Tom Riley looked down at his plate. I felt the old pull to laugh it off, to make the moment smaller so no one else would have to sit in the discomfort. I let it pass. I stood up. The letter from my mother was in my jacket pocket. The screenshots from the forwarded chat were on my phone. I walked to the centre table where most people could hear. "My older brother has been telling all of you that I am unstable," I said. My voice stayed even. He has been saying my promotion came with panic attacks and that I turn everything into drama. He has been saying it in text to my father and in private chats with the rest of you. The pavilion quieted in pieces. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. My older brother's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes went flat. "Lauren, this really isn't the place to." I pulled the letter out. "Our mother wrote this before she died. She watched you do the same thing years ago when I got my first real job. She tried to tell our father once and he chose not to look too closely. She left this so I would not make the same mistake of staying quiet to keep the peace." I read the lines that mattered. The ones about him framing my successes as problems. The ones about our father choosing the easier story every time. My father's face changed. He started to speak, then stopped. My cousin Derek stepped forward from the edge of the group. "I accidentally forwarded one of the chats last week," he said. "Brandon was telling people to keep things low-key around Lauren because she was spiralling. I thought it was just one conversation. It was more than that." The quiet broke into overlapping voices. My Aunt Carol asking what exactly had been said. My sister Olivia telling my older brother to stop talking over people. My younger brother Ethan looking between all of us like the ground had moved under his feet. Mrs. Evelyn Harper and Tom Riley standing back watching the family they had known for years split open in front of them. My older brother tried again. "This is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about." She turned normal concern into an attack on her. My phone buzzed in my hand, a message from my distant Uncle Frank. He had been driving in from 2 states over and had just seen the group texts. He attached screenshots my mother had sent him years earlier, old messages where my older brother had done the same thing to another relative who had started a small business. The pattern went back further than any of us had known. My mother had tried to show my father them too. I read the message out loud. The pavilion went still again. My father sat down on one of the benches. He looked smaller than he had that morning. The gathering broke up after that. People left in small groups. Some hugged me on the way out. Some avoided eye contact. My older brother left without a word. My father stayed a few extra minutes. I did not know it went that far. "Back," he said. "You did?" I answered. "You just chose the version that asked less of you." He did not argue. That told me everything I needed. I drove back to the house, packed my bag and left before dark. I sent one text to my sister Olivia and my cousin Derek before I pulled out of the driveway. "I am choosing to stop pretending this is normal. I love you both. That does not mean I will keep showing up to be managed." In the weeks that followed, some things shifted and some things stayed broken. My older brother stopped reaching out. My father called twice, both conversations short and careful. The casual group texts about holidays and weekend trips slowed and then stopped. No one planned another gathering at the Kentucky house. The easy rhythm we had all pretended was permanent was gone. I went back to my life. I kept the promotion and the work that actually mattered. Jenna from the office became someone I could talk to without having to translate myself first. A few quiet messages came from Olivia and Derek over time, small check-ins that did not require me to perform stability for anyone else. The letter from my mother stayed in my desk drawer at home. I did not need to read it again to remember what it said. She had known the cost of silence. I had finally learned it too. Choosing myself did not bring the family back to what it used to be. It only made the truth visible. Some people could not stay once the truth was out loud. That was the price. It was also the freedom. I still feel the loss on certain days, the holidays that used to be automatic, the calls that used to come without thinking, but I no longer trade my reality for a seat at a table that requires me to disappear to keep it steady. If your family has ever asked you to shrink parts of yourself so the rest could stay comfortable, you already know the choice that actually matters, the one that costs something real, and the one that finally lets you breathe. Thank you for listening to my story.